The recent shooting incident in Newtown, Connecticut is tragic. What we've come to learn from the official story, at least, is that a deeply disturbed and seemingly unstable young man committed a horrific act, taking the lives of others before taking his own. What we must understand is that individuals like this will use any tools available to them to carry out these kinds of acts if they are so motivated. On the same day as this tragedy in Connecticut, a man in China broke into a school armed only with a knife and slashed a teacher and 22 students before being subdued. In New York City several years ago, a man burned 87 people in a bar to death using only a single can of gasoline. It is an unfortunate fact that such people exist in our society who carry out acts of terror and violence against others. As such, there is absolutely no guarantee that Adam Lanza, given his state of mind, would not have pursued all available means to accomplish his motivated desire to cause harm to others as well as himself. In the wake of this tragedy, there is a class of individuals in this country who would like to take advantage of this event to either severely restrict or altogether ban civilian ownership of firearms. These individuals have long hated the notion of private civilian ownership of firearms in any form and have taken this horrific tragedy as an opportunity to grandstand over the bodies of the dead to push an extremist political agenda onto the backs of over 100 million lawful and responsible American gun owners. Who are these individuals? Many are the media pundits like Piers Morgan of CNN, who's not even an American citizen. Others like Dianne Feinstein of California and Mayor Bloomberg of New York are leading members of the leftist political establishment. These individuals feel so strongly about gun control that they remained silent as the current administration ships thousands of assault rifles and other military-grade hardware to Mexican drug cartels as part of Operation Fast and Furious. These weapons have been used in the murders of hundreds of innocent Mexican civilians, as well as several law enforcement officers on our side of the border. While responsible gun owners scream for accountability, these people remained hypocritically silent. The only logical conclusion that can be drawn from this is that many in the so-called liberal establishment pay lip service to the notion of racial equality, but not much else. When the victims of violence are white, as in the Newtown, Connecticut incident, then they speak out. If they are black or brown, then it just doesn't matter. Now these same individuals who support an administration that supplies weapons to murderers and drug dealers want to strip law-abiding Americans of the right to bear arms. The truth is that many of those who remain silent while our own government supplied the drug cartels with military-grade weapons to commit murder and terror hate the notion of individual liberty, individual responsibility, and self-reliance that is so embedded into the historical relationship between America and private firearm ownership. Since the beginning, American citizens have relied on firearms to provide food, to ensure the safety of their homes and families, and to serve as the last line of defense for our democratic traditions against the forces of tyranny and criminality. We have a political establishment in Washington, D.C. that openly covers for Wall Street financial criminals like Wachovia and HSBC that launder money for drug cartels and terrorist organizations we supposedly fight against, that passes laws like the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, authorizing the disappearing and indefinite imprisonment of American citizens without charge or trial, and that actively arms the very criminal enterprises that flood America's streets with the drugs that they have passed laws against. This same political establishment now has the gall to come before the American people to tell us to trust them on gun control. Who do they think they're kidding? The founders of this country understood that an armed population was the bulwark between a free society and those who would criminally oppress it. This is why the right to bear arms is enshrined in our own Constitution. Authoritarian government is basically a criminal enterprise where the rule of law does not exist. Throughout the 20th century, we see example after example where populations were disarmed by these types of criminal enterprises only to suffer the horror of genocide. 12 million under Hitler, 25 million under Stalin, and between 60 and 80 million under Mao. The political pundits and political establishment expects us, the American citizen, to put our trust in a political class that has strenuously worked to subvert and destroy the rule of law in this country. The same political class that is so arrogant and views its citizenry with such disdain that it engages in acts of criminal wiretapping, passes laws that gut the right to due process, cavorts with criminals and drug pushers, and maintains a database of American citizens who they classify as terrorists for the mere act of exercising their God-given right to freely express their opinion. We are expected to simply trust these people and hope for the best. The people in the victim disarmament crowd are a different story, however. These people will tell you that firearms are the root of violence and crime. Despite what they say, they will never tell you the truth that victim disarmament never results in a drop in violent crime. The exact opposite is true when we consider that towns and states with the most restrictive gun laws have some of the highest incidents of violent crime. They will never tell you that states with concealed carry laws have homicide rates that are 30% lower and robbery rates 46% lower than states that either restrict or ban concealed carry, according to the Department of Justice's 2000 Uniform Crime Report. The same is true in places like Britain, which now has the highest rates of violent crime of any Western nation, well ahead of the U.S. and even South Africa, despite having enacted some of the most stringent gun laws in Western Europe. The rate of violent crime in Britain is so bad that it is 5 times higher on average than the rate in the U.S. This is a fact that they will never tell you. We know that guns in the hands of responsible citizens actually reduces violent crime because what criminals say they fear even more than the police is the prospect of confronting an armed victim who can fight back with lethal force. 500 times each and every day, a firearm saves a woman from rape or sexual assault in this country. Firearms are used more than 4,000 times each day to prevent a crime in progress, whether it's a home invasion, attempted rape, or robbery. Those who push the victim disarmament agenda will never share these statistics with you. They will never share the story of a man with a concealed carry permit who put a stop to another potential mass slaying in an Oregon mall just days prior to the Connecticut school shooting. This law-abiding citizen potentially saved dozens of lives that day, but they will never share that story or any of the other thousands of stories that occur daily where a firearm is used successfully in defense against a would-be attacker. Instead of pointing the finger at an inanimate object, we should be asking ourselves, what is it that compels some people to commit such horrific deeds? From the widespread use of antidepressant medication that can potentially induce psychotically violent episodes as a side effect, to the increasingly graphic violence we stream into our homes from video games and the TV set, these are the real issues we should be addressing in the wake of the Connecticut tragedy. We should also be asking why a political class that cares so much about gun violence supports an administration's efforts to directly arm Mexican drug cartels and create a veritable war zone along our southern border. For the first 200 years of this country, the availability of firearms was much greater than it is today, yet mass shootings were almost unheard of. Somewhere along the line we changed as a nation, and how we've changed is what we should reflect on in light of this tragedy. I'll end with a quote from the very first president of the United States, George Washington, who understood very well the necessity of having a heavily armed citizenry. And I quote, "A free people ought not only to be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government." Disarming the victim for the illusion of safety is not a solution. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and one that I, as a free American, cannot and will not support.